Illegal fishing sucks. There's no doubt about it, and it happens all the time, all over the world. But imagine in an area where we don't know much about, like North Korea. Apparently, a Global Fishing Watch, an organization that looks after illegal fishing and where we can monitor more illegal fishing to stamp it out, posted an article on July 22nd where they looked at new technology that unveiled massive illegal fishing from dark fleets in North Korea. We're going to talk about what those dark fleets are, where they're from, and how we can try and stamp it out. And potentially new Chinese policy that we've discussed before could actually help this matter. That's on this episode of the Speak Up for the Ocean Blue podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the Speak Up for the Ocean Blue podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. Today we're talking North Korea fisheries. Now that's something I probably never would have thought I would be talking about. North Korea is a country where we don't really know a lot about, just in general, of the actual inner runnings. We know that it is very dark in terms of publicity. We know there's not a lot of stories coming out of there. Kim Jong-un has a lot of things on lockdown. We don't even know if he's alive or not. That's how bad it is in terms of the amount of information we get from North Korea. But we never really talk about their fishing fleet. We never really talk about what happens fishing in their waters or who is fishing in the waters. We're going to talk about that today. But first, I wanted to talk to you about last week on Friday's episode. I talked about how I'm trying to revamp my new YouTube channel. Now that post that I put up, that episode had the episode for this podcast, but also the episode for the video podcast, which I tried to make the same. But I thought that was a little confusing. I haven't even posted that episode on my YouTube channel yet, so if you looked for it, I apologize. But it will go up this week. Hopefully, by the time you listen to this, it'll be up. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make separate episodes for each. They're going to be same type of content, same type of episodes, but they're just going to be in a little bit more of a shorter form, a little bit more, hopefully, visually appealing. I'm just still working out the kinks and trying to get back into that process. So the YouTube channel is up and it's going to be running. It's just going to take me a little bit longer than expected. Hopefully, it'll be up and running now. But I will be doing separate content because I don't want to confuse people who are listening to this now on audio, having to say, oh, hey, go in put your comment in the description below, when you can't do that on your podcast app, right? I wish you could. I wish there was an app that you can do it, and I'm still working on that because we're going to be revamping our Patreon next, but where you can actually put down comments and have really good conversations, even better than our Facebook group. But that's where we're at right now with this YouTube channel. So I want to let you know about that. But back to our episode, North Korea fishing. So apparently this group, Global Fishing Watch, first time I've heard of it, but it's been around for quite a long time. It's a nonprofit organization. And essentially it's talking about an article that was published with 13 co-authors that was published, a study in the Science Advances Global Fishing Watch. And it revealed a widespread illegal fishing in North Korea between 2017 and 2018, where they said hundreds of large industrial vessels originating from China likely violated the UN sanctions and caught almost $500 million worth of Pacific flying squid. Now, I've talked about Pacific flying squid last time I talked about the Chinese government, how the Pacific flying squid is at risk. I don't know the full IUCN designation, but it's not doing well, and so China had signed on as of April 1st, of 2020, had signed on to say, hey, we're going to do more about this Pacific flying fish. So they're talking about that, but they said they found over 3,000 smaller vessels, North Korean artisanal vessels, almost all of which operated illegally, fishing in Russian waters. So there were Chinese boats illegally fishing in North Korean waters, violating UN sanctions, and also probably violating North Korean laws, I'm assuming, if they even have laws there about fishing. And then there were 3,000 smaller North Korean artisanal fishing boats that were actually illegally fishing in Russian waters in 2018. So a lot of illegal activity happening in that part of the world, where there's probably not a lot of enforcement or even monitoring in that term. So what's really interesting is the way to monitor is another thing, right? So the Global Fishing Watch organization use a variety of different tools. They use the vessel GPS data from the Automatic Identification System, that's AIS, that allows them to monitor movements of the vessels that broadcast their position. So AIS is known all across the world. It is something that allows coast guards and different countries to be able to identify the placements of each ship vessel, where they're from or where they're registered, and where they're going and where they've been. You can look at all the tracks. I've actually worked with this data on behalf of the government before. It was sort of like a classified kind of thing because they don't usually share that information because it's a lot of shipping is involved. But they use that data. It's actually quite good. They use its GPS data. Once it's turned on, it can be a really good tool to find out where ships go and how to track them. It's really great when you look at shipping, like trying to create shipping lanes or trying to create areas where you want to put in a marine protected area away from these, classic, you can call them, or used pathways, used shipping lanes. The other tools that they use in this study is optical imagery from Planet, which provides visual confirmation of vessels, and then nighttime optical image that reveals squid vessels that use bright lights to attract catch. So they use the lights in there to identify the ships, and then satellite radar, which also allows them to count vessels even under overcast skies. So that's always nice to have, right? So radar sat that the Canadian government has put up into the orbit is really good for that as well. It looks through clouds. So, if anybody's worked with remote sensing imagery or satellite imagery, if you have an optical imagery, if there's cloud cover, which often there is, it's really hard to penetrate through. It's really hard to see, and you almost have to throw out that image. So, and let's be honest, this imagery is not cheap. When I was working with it like 5 to 10 years ago, it was not cheap. I'm sure it's still not cheap. So what they did is they looked at that and they showed a lot of that study where they monitor between 2017 and 2018. There was a lot of illegal activity. Then what they did is they decided they worked with their partners to obtain more imagery in 2019 and 2020 and repeated the same analysis. They wanted to see if that illegal activity was still happening. When you put out a paper to say, hey, we've identified this illegal activity, what's being done about it? That was 2017, 2018, not allowing a lot of time for policies to take place. Unfortunately, governments, we all know, and especially international sort of treaties and stuff, take a while to put into place and implement. But they decided to look at 2019, 2020 to see if there's anything that's done. Now, I'm going to put a link to this article that has a link to another article that has the results for the 2019 analysis, and some of the 2020 can also be seen in their blog post that I put a link to. But essentially, the key takeaway is that illegal fishing has continued, basically unabated. 2019 was extremely similar to the previous years. In 2020, large foreign fleets have already started fishing in North Korean waters. Now, I should mention that their fishing season starts between May and September. So when this was published in July, they probably only had a few months of data, but already seeing some large fishing boats come in. That is not a good sign by any means. They also noticed that when they looked at the Russian waters for North Korean vessels, they looked at 2019. There were actually fewer in 2019 than were in 2018. They also noticed that at least with 2,000 vessels, they said that there's probably over, like when you calculate all the hours, 150,000 likely total days of fishing. The fishing activity in 2019 was still higher than 2017 and in previous years. They said the number of North Korean vessels that washed ashore in Japan with human remains or no crew, referred to as ghost boats, is highly correlated with the number of North Korean vessels in Russian waters and the number of days these vessels fished. This trend, they say, suggests that the number of so-called ghost boats found on the Japanese shores is related to the number of ill-equipped North Korean vessels fishing far into Russian waters. So if you're fishing there and you're trying to fish as much as possible, maybe you're trying to get as much catch as possible, maybe you don't find the catch that you want. You went in, the captain brought you to the wrong area, or maybe your net's broke or something, or the boat is not in the best shape when it first goes off. These waters are not friendly by any means to a boat that's not equipped to be in those waters and be able to handle rough waves. So in that respect, there are a lot of boats that washed ashore. Obviously, lives were lost, and it's something that needs to be addressed in terms of that, especially if it's illegal fishing. They said the 2020 fishing season started in May and will continue through to December, not September. And they said the technologies applied in their Science Advances paper also were used to monitor these vessels in the season that progresses. They said they started processing the 2020 data and can already see over 600 pair of trawlers originating from China operating in North Korean waters already. So they're already seeing this movement. So this is something that is not being addressed, right? We saw 2017, 2018 illegal fishing happening, 2019, and now even to 2020, we're already seeing illegal activity. Now it'll be interesting to see if COVID has any sort of decrease or increase in the number of boats that are out there. If that's even possible to measure, we don't even know. But that's something that's going to be interesting. Now, it goes, the article, and I'm going to let you read into this. The article goes into, talking about decisive action of large scale illegal fishing, how it's, the UN Security Council has established a committee to oversee some sanctions imposed against North Korea, but that's not being met. China's just going ahead and doing their own thing. China has also refuted a lot of the allegations, maintaining that Chinese authorities have prohibited ocean fishing operations in North Korea in the seas in that area. So they're saying that it's not true. And so they're denying it. But it's kind of interesting. In later on or earlier this year, they put in a place of their distance fleet policies. They put in place new policies to fight illegal fishing, to have more port monitoring, to have more enforcement, and to have stricter punishments. Just to remind you, they're going to take away the captain's license for 3 years. They're also going to ban the manager who's managing the operation, which is usually from a company. They'll ban that person from working in that industry for 3 years. Now, whether that's going to happen, that was the point of the last episode that we did on this, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes for Apple, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, and I'll put the episode number. But essentially, that's something that that's still to be seen, to see if that happens and see the results of that, how many fines have been put out, how many people have been banned, and whether that's going to happen. Previously, if you were caught with contraband or illegal catch, you were fined, and you can just turn around and go out and get more catch and hope you don't get caught the next time. Though that was the severity of the fine. So that's something that you don't want to happen. You want to make sure that there's stricter rules. China has implemented the stricter rules. Whether they're enforcing it or not is something to be seen. But it's a question I put in the Facebook group to say, hey, do you think this is going to happen? So something to look forward to see if this actually works. But obviously, this is troubling news. Not surprising, but troubling news looking at fisheries in the Pacific, in North Korea, but it also gives us a little bit of insight into that. So something to look forward to see if something comes out of it. But what I like about this article, it talks about the importance of monitoring, right? Just inherently into the story. If we're able to monitor through satellite imagery, through nighttime imagery, through optical imagery, through radar imagery, we have access to those tools, and more people can implement those, then we can see what's happening. We can tell a story of what's actually happening and not be so blinded by the lack of technology and allowing vessels to get away with illegal catch. If we prove that China fleets are along the border of a marine protected area in the Galapagos, then there's all eyes on China and all eyes on that vessel fleet and how much they're taking. There's going to be more pressures. There's going to be more, I'm not going to say sanctions, but there's going to be more pressures to join certain committees, to abide by certain rules. And you already see China, which is a large country that pretty much does what it wants, already trying to get on specific committees for port authorities. And to be able to do that, they have to have certain policies in place. Now, again, the enforcement is another thing, remains to be seen. I'm not saying Canada, the U.S. has enforcement perfect in everything, but China definitely doesn't as well. And with the amount of people and the size of the fleet that they have, it's a big undertaking. So something to look into and to see what's going to happen in the future. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think that the UN has any ability to put any kind of sanctions or be able to do anything about this feature? Or do you think the press or people putting pressure on China at different committees, international committees, is worth doing it? And do you think the new policy that China has implemented is going to be worthwhile? All these things, do you think it's worthwhile? Do you think it's actually going to be, beneficial to fishing and decreasing illegal fishing? Love to hear your thoughts. Go to the Speak Up for Blue Facebook group. And of course, don't forget to go to our channel, our YouTube channel. I'm going to put it in the links, and just subscribe, because there's going to be a video at some point. And you can, if you're a YouTube watcher, I know a lot of people don't have cable, and we've watched almost everything on Netflix, so it's something to look at. So and you can see my face. Not that it's a pretty face, but you can see my face. Anyway, check that out, and then links in the show notes. That's on the app that you're at. You look in the show notes there. There'll be a bunch of links. And check out all of our other shows on the podcast network. And until next time, I want to thank you so much for joining us on the Speak Up for the Ocean Blue podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. Have a great day. We'll talk to you on Wednesday, and happy conservation.